it's about getting to the point where the customer has a good deal, you have a good deal, and therefore you've both won. So my philosophies really are about giving people confidence. And if you give sales teams, individuals, leaders confidence, not arrogance, confidence, and help them through the challenges, and as a overall, whether it's been as a rep, whether it's been as a manager, I see my role is to help them achieve their goals, whether that be knocking down barriers internally, whether it be helping them with external barriers. And you can take that into your own personal life of, helping your kids or helping anybody, knock down those things. And that's really the key, is giving people confidence to be able to achieve. So therefore, because customers will always throw an objection in to try and get the price down or to try and do something, and it's giving the people the confidence that they can handle that objection in a sensible way that makes the customer feel okay and makes the salesperson feel okay. And it's about getting to the point where the customer has a good deal, you have a good deal, and therefore you've both won. Because quite a lot of prospects want to win and they want you to lose. And what you've got to try and get to is a win-win relationship.
Awesome. So what are some of the psychological levers that we can use to lead prospects into a win-win style of scenario and feel like they've had that?
Well, I think one of the things is you can't barrier them on price. You've got to let them win some of the battles. What you've got to do and that can be battles, depending on what you're selling, on spec, on price, on giving them a few free things. You've got to let them have some wins, but you've also got to get some wins. And you've got to trade. A well-known thing is you trade. They ask for something, you give them something, but you get something in return. And there's many different ways of doing it, but both sides have got to come away at times like they've had wins. And if you have that, then you do. You also, obviously, Tom, you've got to build rapport, you've got to build a relationship, you've got to fulfill their needs. There's many other things, but I'm just talking in terms of the high level from here.
Yeah, it makes sense. Something you said there is, as a leader, it's about helping people achieve their goals, which is interesting for me because it almost reverts the traditional style of leadership. Maybe it's outdated, maybe it never existed, where actually they help you achieve your goals. Is this something you've seen realistically or materially change in your time in revenue leadership? And if so, what's fermenting this new style or this different approach?
So I always believe if you look after the team and help them achieve their goals, your goals will follow in some stage. If you're obsessed by achieving your goals, not only will you probably miss your goals, but your team will miss their goals. And I think you should always focus on them first and yourself second. And many leaders make the mistake of focusing on, I have to make my plan, not about, I have to drive the teams to their plan. And that sometimes means, as a leader, you won't necessarily always make plan, but your team will make plan. You'll have a motivated team and they will achieve well. And that, I've always believed that look after the team and they will look after you. That's always been my philosophy throughout. And I think it's served me pretty well.
Okay. This is great, Nick, because it's very relevant to this discussion of VPs. As we know, a typical tenure, not same for everyone, but a typical tenure is something like 18 months for a VP, and it's getting shorter. And this is sometimes a problem for a CRO, right? Because we need good VPs who stick around. So first question, what makes a great VP of sales? And linked to this, what makes a VP of sales that stays around, that has a long tenure?
I think a VP of sales has a good mixture between their sales skills, i.e. they understand how the sales process works, they understand how sales works. So you say that's one area. Two is they're good at motivating their team. And what I mean by is some days salespeople have bad days. They just need picking up. They just need helping. They get down. Everybody gets down, and it's motivating the team and making sure using data also to look at the different levels of pipeline, close rates, not just going on gut feel, but looking at data. And then also, if you look back and say, how do you make them stay? You empower them, you help them, you empower them, and you allow them to be empowered. So if you have an empowered VP that is able to motivate his or her teams, is able to take them on the journey, I think you will have. But I do agree, sales VPs have, and it's generally because companies are becoming less and less patient, and they sometimes put a new VP in to solve a problem when the problem may be somewhere else, and therefore they get impatient with the VP, and the problem isn't actually necessarily a sales execution problem. It could be more a fundamental problem elsewhere in the company, but they haven't actually always done the analysis to work it out. It could be a problem with marketing leads. It could be a problem that every lead comes in and the product doesn't fit that, so therefore their close rates are way out. There could be many reasons that are not to do with the sales VP. I think one of the biggest struggles a lot of sales VPs have is they're not as data driven as they could be, because actually a sales VP also, it's a bit like, they say a CRO is chief repetitive officer, chief reminding officer, whatever you want to do. A good VP is also able to do the same thing again and again and again, and just repeating it again and again and again, but in a positive, motivational way. And that's one of the hardest things I think people do is, whether you're a SaaS business where it's monthly driven, or more a traditional software business that is probably more quarterly, it's remembering you're back to zero at the start of the month, start of the quarter, start of the year. And it's just helping people stay motivated and keeping everybody, and understanding what are the levers you can pull, and then partnering with the different parts of the business. And that's always a tough one, because sales VPs are very, by their nature, normally quite emotional people. They get very excited, and sometimes those emotions don't always go as well as they could do in other parts of the business. And what you've got to do is take people along with you, not just in the sales area, but in other parts of the business.
Okay, this is great. I wanted to pick up on something you said here, which is where you pick people up after failure, you make them feel confident, you make them feel empowered.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, there's probably a line when maybe we need to intervene more, or maybe we should be concerned. So how do you strike that balance? How do you know when to strike the balance, and how do you toe the line between the motivation or the confidence, and maybe a discussion that might be more concerning?
I think what you've got to do is you've got to look at that from a data-driven point of view.
Yeah.
And take the emotion out of it, and look at the data and compare and contrast. And what you've got to do as a sales VP, or what I do is I give the VPs the data. The data allows you to, whether you comparing multiple reps and working it out from there. And I think you get a gut feel when because people sometimes don't do very well in companies, and it can be to do with the way you sell is very different to what they're used to. They've been very successful somewhere else. It doesn't mean they'll always be successful in the company you're running. It could be that the intricacies of your product is very different. It could be the sales cycles take a lot longer. There's many reasons why. And I think what you've got to do is you've got to take a data-driven decision. And if people have the right attitude together, you can probably get there. If the attitude's not right, then you maybe not going to get there. But it's always a difficult decision. And what you've got to understand is you will never get it 100% right. And what you've got to do is go with even though I'm saying data-driven decisions, sometimes you have to take a bit of a gut check with the data.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So data tells us what's true here, and it takes some of the emotions out.
Correct, because sales is quite an emotional thing. People buy from people.
Yeah.
So that's an emotional connection generally.
Yeah.
But it's always a difficult thing. I'm a big believer in data helps you make good decisions.
Awesome. Okay, another theme you mentioned was empowerment.
Mhm.
So what are some of the first responsibilities you give a VP to stretch test them, to test them under fire, to see if we can build that sense of empowerment in them by giving them some autonomy, for example?
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of different ways. Not, depending on the company, normally you can't give them massive empowerment on hiring. In other words, say hire as many salespeople as you want. You've normally got budgets and stuff like that. So what you have to do is you have to give them some budgetary empowerment where you have to say, look, if you want to change that from a junior salesperson to a senior salesperson or a pre-salesperson, so you give them that budget, how they get their design is an important thing. That's a way you can empower them. You can empower them with discounting, but also you've got to be careful because one thing you train people on is whatever discount you give down to the sales reps, they'll normally give that to the customer. So you've got to give them, and you've got to make them feel like they don't have to come to you to get approval for things. You've got to, and if you can build that trust, then they feel empowered and will go and make decisions. That could be empowerment on, I'm comfortable with you making these kind of legal decisions. It could be any range of things. That it could be that normally I need to approve this, but I'm comfortable with you approving this. And then you can see how well they manage that. Some people are good at managing budgets as VPs. Some people aren't. Some people are really good at managing discounts. Some people aren't. And depending on the individual, depends on which bit you want to do. But you definitely want to give them autonomy and empowerment. Otherwise, you're pushing them down a lane that won't be great. But different people have different strengths.
Okay, that's really interesting then. So if we had a team of VPs, maybe we're in a company like that, would we give different prescriptions or autonomy to different types of people? And how would we explain that for the whole team of VPs as to why it's working that way?
And that's a difficult one. When you've got like 5 VPs, you've got to have standardization. Unfortunately, that's where you've got to have standardization. If you have 1 VP in, say, I don't know, Asia Pacific and 1 VP in EMEA, then it makes it pretty easy. But if you've got, say, 3 or 4 VPs in the UK, then you have to have some kind of standardization. Unfortunately, you can't be. As you grow, your ability to be more empowering to the individual becomes harder. In scale ups, it's a lot easier because you don't have a wrath of VPs. In a corporation, it's very hard to empower VPs, because you have standards that you have to follow, and unfortunately, with those standards means some VPs feel they're not empowered.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome.
Many a time I felt when I was a VP in a corporation that I can't do this, because you can't. You have to follow the corporate rules and stuff like that, which is right. So it becomes very hard to empower VPs in the right way.
Okay. On the theme of standardization, then, getting back to this data discussion, one of the great level playing fields. So what you're looking from a VP in terms of their ability to articulate data, articulate their team's performance, likely challenges ahead, for example?
I always think that they should be thinking not about this month, not about next month, not about this quarter, but further out. They should be looking at, where's my pipeline, where's my rep capacity, where am I doing? They should be thinking, and that's a good VP is looking at short, medium, long term. A lot of them look, lens wise, I'm looking at this month. What you've got to do is look at this month with an eye on next month, with an eye on next quarter, and have an eye on that. So therefore, because a first line manager looks at this month. A VP needs to be looking longer term, and a CRO, my responsibility is to be thinking about next year. have I got the capacity for next year? What am I going to do next year? What have I got to look at? What am I looking at from a churn perspective? What am I looking at from a marketing perspective for this time next year? That's my responsibility. So a VP is kind of in between those two. And that's what they've got to be looking at. And that's a mixture of data. That's a mixture of, looking at rep performance, looking at things like marketing qualified lead conversion, sales qualified leads conversion, sales accepted opportunity, all those standard kind of metrics, and looking at them and making sure that they're aware of them, they're monitoring them, they're looking at them. Now, data is good, but you also need to talk to people. It's really important to gather feedback from different areas to take a joint decision with data. Also, you'll find as you manage bigger businesses, sometimes you have to make decisions with 50% of the data or 60% of the data or 20% of the data. And that becomes harder. And that's one of the biggest challenges is, it's easy it's sometimes because you have 100% of the data and you go, oh, I can definitely make this decision. But the challenge comes is when you have 40% of the data, because you haven't got enough to say, well, the majority is, but you've just got to take a decision and, based on the portion of data you have.
I like your point about, CROs, we're thinking year ahead, managers this month, VPs middle. But this is interesting thing for me is reps go through the ranks from an executor to a manager, VP, CRO. They have to adjust to thinking about things in a very different stratosphere.
Yeah.
And I'm really curious to hear how you coach and lead and train people to think on different levels in sales and what that process looks like and what journey people go through.
Yeah, it is a tough journey, and the journey is, first level. I know from my experience, first level, you kind of become the super salesperson, and that's the general trap you fall into. And then you've got to learn that you're stretched enough that you can't be the super salesperson. I think the hardest transition for most people who are salespeople is moving from first level to second level. Because you're one step removed, you then have to rely on data. And what I try and coach the team on is I try and say, these are some of the challenges you're going to face. These are some of the areas you may want to look at data and give them data. Try and ask them questions that will make them go and look for that data and coach them and help them. Tell them that, these are some of the experiences I've had. Try and say to them, it's okay to make mistakes, because it is. The key thing is in any, because the challenge is in most times you normally move one of your best reps into management because that's the stage they want to go. And that's a real challenge for a business, because you're taking one of your top reps and you're making them a manager, and they've got to learn to qualify how they qualified their customers. They've got to learn to qualify the other reps without ostracizing them and without helping them. But also you've got to check, you can't just go, oh, okay, well, if that's in that stage, I'm comfortable with that. And it's taking them through scenarios, giving them data. And it's not a quick process. Some of it is time in the saddle. Some of it is making mistakes. The new managers missing numbers, learning that way. I think we all learn well when we make a mistake. And that's a challenge. But I wouldn't say coaching through the ranks is easy. I think it's a very tough thing. And I think different people struggle with different things in different areas. I think the way I look at it is I try and remember some of the challenges I have and then look and see if I can see those happening with some of the people, and then just help them. But it's a bit like your kids. You can't say, I told you this was going to happen. You can't. You've got to be supportive, and you've also got to just help them through these things.
Circles back nicely to the beginning of the discussion, where it's about empowerment and confidence building.